Our next speaker is Dr. Lynne Morrison. Dr. Morrison is an energy healer whose hands-on work and research interests are soundly rooted in knowledge of the human subtle energy system and is strongly informed by traditional healing arts from around the world. Lynne spent 11 years living in India, studying with master teachers and practicing the meditative and philosophical foundations of the body's subtle energy systems. She holds a doctorate in Oriental Medicine. She is certified as a licensed acupuncturist and holds a Master in Science of Oriental Medicine. She has more than 25 years of clinical experience with diverse populations in a variety of settings in both the US and in India. She has also helped people move through structural issues, injuries, energy imbalances, pain, chronic and acute disease challenges, chemotherapy toxicity, fatigue, food sensitivities, and more. Please welcome Dr. Lynne Morrison.
Oh, good morning. And thank you for inviting me to speak at the 4th annual U.S. Spiritist Medical Congress. I'm very happy to be here, and I really appreciate the warmth and the welcoming and the kindness that I've been shown by the organizers, by the staff, by all of the volunteers. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here in the company of healthcare professionals and caregivers and caring people interested in health and healing, which encompasses the range and the depth of human experience. And I'm very humbled by this opportunity to speak with you. In the worldwide practice of spiritual healing or energy healing, as we've heard from other speakers, there are numerous styles and approaches that you may already be incorporating into your medical practices and healing work. And one aspect of energy healing that runs throughout almost all of the varieties is the transference and the transfusion and the movement of energy, as seen as I've learned in the Spiritist passes. That's practiced beautifully in Brazil and all over the world. And you may have noticed that people, especially when they're faced with illness, seem to agree that there's more to being alive than just the physical body parts, that there is spirit. And this knowing of spirit or spiritual energy is part of the human experience and accessible to everyone in a variety of ways. So in preparing to talk with you today, as a practitioner, I thought we could work from this assumed shared foundation of the spiritual energies within us and the spiritual presence around us. And I would outline some of the bases for the type of work that I've been doing. And I'll also be describing the development of some pilot research work that our team conducted in a pediatric hospital, and describe the protocols and the techniques and methods that I developed for that work. And I will share some experience of what it takes to integrate energy healing into the environment of science, technology, and conventional medicine, what I call the embrace of spirit and science. Perhaps you will hear something that will stimulate your imagination or that might even be helpful to you in your practice, health and healing. My own style of healing is hybrid, incorporating 3 modes. One is pretty traditional laying on of hands healing with transference of energy, expanded awareness, and along with that, there's very directed energy healing for specific effect. And thirdly, the openness for spirit intervention, awareness of spirit information being received, and having spiritual energies work through the body. In recent years, I've included Oriental Medicine in my work. And with this inclusion, I work toward, and I'm striving toward, a level of Oriental medicine that Dr. Ted Kapczyk, in his excellent book, the web that has no weaver, mentions as the penetrating divine illumination, a term used in Oriental Medicine original texts, yet not heard much in current clinical work today. And he describes this level of working as an intimate, intuitive, and immediate encounter of humanity. It's the magic of soul meeting soul, spirit reflecting spirit, and it is the spirit of the medicine. So I'd like to begin by sharing with you the basis upon which I've been working in energy healing. I've been a professional energy healer for almost 30 years now, offering my services in a variety of settings: clinical, private practice, hospital, charitable. And people are different, of course, but there are three main themes that run through the development of an energy healer, and they're all lifetime engagements. I'll share mine with you not as the way, but as an example of developmental choices. For me, the first was experiencing energy. In my early 20s, I met a masterful Japanese practitioner named Shizuko Yamamoto. And through her work, I first experienced the movement of energy in my own body and how that can be influenced in other people's bodies. And so I already kind of knew that this was my path. So what to do with the experience and what modality to study, where to go with it. I got some great guidance. She said really simply, she said, develop the energy. Then it doesn't matter what form you practice, it will come. So I remember at that time, I dragged my husband and my little son around looking for ways to develop the energy. And I discovered Aikido, a defensive martial art that was born out of a Japanese warrior's deep spiritual awakening. So I learned how to take the experience of the inner energy, hold it, and begin to extend it outward, to extend what's called ki, and to blend, to sense ki, to move with appropriate timing. And with that practice came a very potent and pithy principle that I have used in practice all the time. If you are pulled, you enter. And if you are pushed, you turn. And at some point comes the realization that, the body is the instrument. And if one is going to offer wholeheartedly, then you need the health and the stamina just to hold yourself up, just to stand on your feet. So part of the training is very practical. You develop a strong body, strong tendons, and stand fully on your feet. And these feet are important. If you know where your feet are all the time and you can feel them, then you have mastered one of the basics for moving energy. And secondly, I have had the great good fortune to be mentored by great healers, both in India and in the United States, and to stand through many healings in which energy flowed very strongly and very directly. So once the body can begin to work with the energy, then what do you do with it for other people's benefit? From these great healers, I learned how to handle the energy dynamics, how to modulate it, how to direct it, get it to run through my body and extend outward, and how to be ordinary in the most extraordinary circumstances, to open to the possibilities of spirit guidance and intervention. And most important, through these mentors, I learned skillful touch and how to connect, how to serve, and compassion, how to offer compassion. In India, there's a greeting. It's called Namaste. You may have heard it. It's putting the hands together at the heart. One person honors the spirit, the divinity within one another, acknowledging the sameness. And this is what is served through the healing. Now, the third piece of development for me has been inner knowledge. In my 11 years in India, through classical studies and meditation, lot of sitting, I deepened my sense of consciousness, and actually some inner knowledge began to blossom, the stillness and the power and the beauty within every single person, and how we connect with a greater consciousness. I dove more deeply into a context for this knowledge, and just as historical yogis found this painting by Alex Gray is what I began to know more deeply. That just as we all have bones and muscles and organs, we also have an energy anatomy and a certain physiology. So this is roughly what many spiritual healers or energy healers work with. And this is where communication takes place through the electromagnetic fields. And once this dynamic energy field, and this is really important, becomes real and tangible, then the denser parts of the body, the bones and the organs, become a vibrating part of an energy matrix. The core energies are in the spine, with the large energy centers connected, the chakras, channels of energy flowing and generating fields of energy all the time, always interacting with greater fields and lesser fields, all interpenetrating like a large weather pattern. So now we're all sitting in large weather patterns in the room. So I love science and I love the technical explanations, but I leave them to the scientists, because what's important to me is to work with what's real and what's tangible, what's experiential. And if anyone wants to work with this system for health or social interactions or to help others, then you can, because we're already sitting inside each other's energy fields, inside each other's auras, much of the time. So it's a matter of awareness and consistently working with that awareness. For instance, I mentioned the feet. So important, it's so simple. Like if you feel your feet right now, the outline, the bottom of your feet, and you place your awareness there, and that's important, then you have improved the alignment and the access to energies in your body. If you stretch your spine a little upward in your chair, if you fill your ribcage with breath, then you have drawn in precious prana or chi or ki or life force, and you've pumped up your energy field, enlivened the living matrix, which James Oshman talks about in his book, Energy Medicine. And I agree when he says the entire living matrix is simultaneously a mechanical, vibrational, or oscillatory, energetic, electronic, and informational network. So if you are a practitioner who sees patients and you are working, can't seem to go back. Okay. If you're a practitioner and you're working with patients, there's one more simple thing. If you align the center line of your body with your patient's body, then a congruent connection has been initiated automatically through your energy fields. So if you're with an ill person, the information in your energy field will naturally flow from the greater to the lesser, will balance into a living rhythm. And as we strive for it, it's energy with heart, with vibratory, compassionate content. These are very simple mechanics and principles which they bring a greater sense of holism, filling of the heart centers, the home of love and compassion. So what happens when you integrate these principles, these simple mechanics, into settings where people are struggling for their lives? Academic, medical, scientific settings in which research may be conducted to try to help such people. So what I found, when you allow science and spirit to enter into an embrace through research, the possibilities become magnified. The natural, expanded nature of spiritual or energy healing is enlivened by the brightness of scientific inquiry. And secondly, the research structures which require constraint and discipline and focus promote innovation in healing technique. So what you get is a refined blend of heart and mind in service to suffering individuals. And people have asked me, how do you deal with the extreme environments of an ICU, high-tech machines, very cramped, emotionally charged quarters? And so what I say is, essentially, you become a portable healing environment that you take wherever you are going. You bring the entirety of the energy system, all of its dimensions, and the content of that heart-centered consciousness, and enlivened sensitivity to what is going on around you, and become the portable healing environment. And that environment engages the goodness in the hearts of the medical personnel, the amazing nurses, and the family members. When looking again at the energy field, the outermost area in which most people have awareness is about an arm's length, if you put out your arms. An example is when we feel somebody behind us from a distance. They're coming toward you into your energy field. The outer area, which has great communication potentials through practice and through awareness, can become like a membrane where we can sense not only physical but also emotional, mental, and spiritual content. And also control what we would like to have closer to us, or what we would like to allow to brush off or pass through, rather than trying to block or prevent or protect. You allow it to move through, to pass through. And it's also possible to learn to extend out, to envelop one another, and to merge with energies. This kind of, it's like a semi-permeable membrane quality of the energy field is very useful in constrained or extreme situations. Now, not every healing encounter can occur in a nicely controlled and pleasant environment. So through practice, we can be that environment. And I remember working in the hospital, one of the ICU nurses was so kind. When she saw me coming down the hall, she would try to create that, what we call that perfect environment. And she would lower the lights a bit, and she would close the drapes. She would turn on for the child the little fishy toy that goes around and around, and then also try to keep people out so we could do our work in the room with the child. But often that's not the case. There are people moving in and out. There's a lot of machinery. There's a lot going on. This is a photo that the mom of this child gave to me. This little girl became the vehicle and the inspiration for me for our pilot research study. In this picture, she's visiting the hospital for her checkup while she waits to hear if a suitable match for stem cells or bone marrow has been found for her leukemia. So here's an example. This is basically the whole room. It's a very cramped room. And at this point, I'm offering my energy field to her, filling and energizing, extending a generous field over her and her mother, her mom who took this picture. This child was enrolled in a general study in which we were measuring changes in pain, discomfort, mood after an energy healing, before and after energy healing treatment. And we conducted about 600 interventions in that study on patients and parents and staff with very good results. And then the head of oncology in the hospital approached the research director, a very courageous research director named Sheila Wong, and asked for a focused study. So when the director asked me to design techniques and perform the interventions, it was a wonderful opportunity to see if we can offer something to the children going through the very difficult process of stem cell transplants for leukemia. So I'd like to now share some of the details of that study with you. So the title of the study was The Evaluation of the Impact of Energy Healing and Enhanced Interaction Interventions on Length of Hospital Stay, Time to Engraftment, Frequency of Infection, and Symptoms in Pediatric Stem Cell Transplant Patients. The patients were all children who had autologous lymphocytic leukemia. And they were randomly assigned in this study to an energy healing intervention or what we called an enhanced interaction intervention. And the enhanced interaction was a nice person playing with the child, and the energy healing was a type of energy healing that I'll share with you. And we've figured out, a nice person, since we share energy fields, of course is going to be offering energy, and of course is going to make an impact on the child. So we wanted to show that the energy healing would make more of an impact. And we had to create a schedule that was in line with the whole process of the stem cell transplant process, which is a very, very difficult process and dangerous in some ways. And as you see, the principal investigator on this study is Sheila Wang. So there were phases of intervention, pre-transplant. In the pre-transplant phase, the child would go through about a week of chemotherapy and radiation. It's really designed to wipe out the bone marrow and wipe out the immune system in the child. And then the transplant happened on what we call day 0, and it looked like a transfusion. The stem cells would be transfused. And then there's a period where you are waiting for the transplant to take hold, for the bone marrow to start developing new blood cells. And then engraftment until discharge, and then there was discharge to day 50 to day 100. So the first assessment that would happen during each of the interventions, there would be a hand scan of the biofield and the outer field. So by biofield, I mean the field that's very close to the body. So you get a sense of what's happening in the organs of the body. And then a visual scan, whatever you can see at that moment, what's happening with the energy field and the energy fields of the people who are also in the room. The hand scan, more specifically, is a scan that happens about 3 or 4 inches from the patient's body, going from foot to head. And then any disturbances in the field were noted on the patient assessment sheet. If an intervention is being performed, the therapist again performs the scan after the intervention and notes. So one thing that was important with these children was not only to scan the field and to see what was happening in the field, but also to be able to enhance the field for the child. In other words, like to pump up that child's energy field through the practitioner's own field. So this requires a knowledge and awareness of one's own energy field, what's happening with your own chakras, what's happening in your field close to your body and far from your body. And whoever is in the room, you also want to extend a very generous field over them. Before the engraftment, in the energy energy healing, the second chakra is really important for the immune system. So for these children wanted to actually avoid stimulating, too much stimulation into that area, as the child was very open without an immune system. And then there's also what we call the web of protection, which I'll show you. There. Then in the week before the transplant, I would do an evaluation of the vibrational quality of bone marrow. And what I had done prior to the study is go around to different people and test what bone marrow feels like. So as I said, once the energy field awareness really builds, then the body becomes much more vibrational. So you can almost like reach into the body, you can feel different qualities of the body. Now, on the day of the transplant, it's a very sacred, very, very important time for the child and for the family. And the room would become, well, the energy in the room would change. It was quite a sacred environment. And the parents were very kind to allow this kind of attunement. And basically what I was trying to do is introduce the cells to the child, introduce the child to the cells. Because the cells, this is an allogeneic transplant, so the cells were coming from another person. This was not the child's cells. This was not coming from, their blood, because the problem was in their blood. So it's coming from another person, either from a bank and a match is found, or a family member who's found to match. So this was quite a lovely time. There'd be a transplant team, the family member, the child. And it was lovely to see everybody working together, the transplant team kind of stopping what they're doing, and the attunement taking place, matching the heart energy of the child, introducing it to the cells, and allowing that to happen. And this is a form that I made up for myself. I try to keep myself blinded to what was actually happening in the bone marrow. So I would mark off what I thought, I felt was happening how the engraftment was going. It wasn't part of any of the data that we collected, but it was something that I kept track. Then multi-point balancing was an intervention that was used throughout. It's derived from chelation, which Rosalind Briere developed and is used in therapeutic touch, healing touch. Most healers now use some variation of chelation, which involves trying to run energy through the major and minor chakras throughout the body to create a balance and to allow a good flow. Then this web of protection, since I didn't want to stimulate the immune system, the second chakra, so I did created this web just above the child's body and also running through just below the skin, the fascia, which is a very electrical kind of tissue in the body. And self-stilling is a technique of stimulating the really deep energy channels in the body, the spinal energy channels. That allows the energies to flow and actually branch out through the nerves and the nadis toward all the organs and the endocrine glands and creates like a vibrational wave that continues for a while. This is a photo of one of the little children in the study, and it illustrates several things. It illustrates the self-stilling that I just talked about. This photo was in U.S. News and World Report. They did an article that included parts of this study. And you can see the dad with the child. It's like a perfect cocoon for the child. A very small room. This child had actually engrafted and gone home, and was now coming back home, back to the ASCU for his follow-up. And this child was interesting because when the parents enrolled in this study, they really didn't know if it was going to work because he just didn't like people touching him. He didn't like people coming near him. And just before this shot was taken, he had been very uncomfortable, crying quite a lot. So, I don't know if you can read this. But when the dad was interviewed, he basically said, if I didn't think it was helping, then we wouldn't be continuing with it. Because when the child is held in the arms of the parent like this, and then the energy begins to flow toward the child, the parent is also receiving it. And when they feel their child just completely, relax and give in, it's a very beautiful and hopeful feeling for them. So this, I'm doing the self-stilling and also engaging the energy field, extending the energy field. And of course, it's a circuit with the child and the dad. So this is just an idea of what happens in the pre-transplant. I would do an energy field assessment, energy field enhancement, check the bone marrow vitality, do a multi-point balancing, and the supportive web, and also self-stilling. And those are a variety of things, and there can be a choice of what to do. And day 0 is the attunement technique that I described. And we also had an alternative in case the parents did not want somebody to be in there with them, but none of them refused. Now, after there is the transplant, then there's this very precious time when the new cells are starting to find their place, their home. We're trying to nurture it and get it to grow. And then I would see the child 4 times a week for 20 minutes a session and do that number of techniques. And once engraftment happens, and engraftment was counted as if the child had an absolute neutrophil count of above 500 for 3 days, then we'd go down to 3 times a week for 20-minute sessions. And again, the assessments, the balancing, bone marrow energy, and then it's really wanting to fill the child's vitality, increase the vitality. And once the child is discharged, it's like a halfway house discharge. They're may not actually be going home yet, but it's 2 interventions per week. And the assessing the aura, self-stilling, the energy assessments also, specific work on specific organs that seem to be out of balance. And the process is difficult. The child is receiving a lot of drugs that can have many interactions and side effects. So the energy healer has to deal not only with, okay, let's try, to pump up the bone marrow, but also when you go into the body, you encounter all those drugs. You encounter all the energies of all those drugs. So it makes it a little bit more complicated. Then day 50 to day 100 is a visit such as the little boy. You saw the little boy. And they come in once a week. And so we have to schedule to see them. And this is a summary of the results. This was a small pilot study. There were 9 patients, 4 in the energy healing group and 5 in the enhanced interaction. And each group included 1 patient with a cord, that's an umbilical cord transplant. And the children who received the blood from the umbilical cords take much longer to engraft. If a child with stem cell would take 13 days, a child who received cord transplant might take 20 days or 30 days. So there was a non-significant reduction in days to engraftment found in the energy healing group compared to the enhanced interaction. There's an even stronger trend toward a shortened engraftment time was found in the energy healing group when excluding the cord transplant subjects, and slight decreases in hospital stay were observed. A larger sample size might yield a significantly shortened time to engraftment, and I definitely think that's true, because there was such a variety in how the children responded to their transplant. And there was also differences in ages. The parental ratings of their child's pain, tension, discomfort, and upset mood were significantly improved in the energy healing group immediately after the sessions. Can I go back? Okay, we'll go back. Okay. So this kind of study is very time intensive, and it's based on the schedule of the children. So even if you're working with 9 children, those 9 children are all starting their transplant at different times, and their schedule is different. So it's quite time intensive, and what it cannot be measured are the dynamics of inner strength and the hope that's touched by this work. There were many beautiful responses by both the children and the parents. And sometimes all of the heroic medical efforts, high technology, hope, intention and prayer, and healing interventions come together for amazing results. And I'd like to share one of those stories with you in closing. I was in my office in the hospital, and I received an email from an ICU doctor, and it was very simple. The email said, "Can you jumpstart a dead heart? And come to the ICU room." So I went down to the ICU, and I entered one of those very constrained environments, a small room filled with machinery and sounds, and a very distraught and prayerful mom. There was a 30-month-old boy. He was on an ECMO machine. That's like a heart-lung machine. So there were tubes snaking out from his body all around the room, pumping his blood. And he had been 6 days on the ECMO with a complete lack of recovery from an irreversible cardiotoxicity. And doctors had in their notes probable end-stage cardiac degeneration. And he needed a heart transplant. But what was difficult is that he had cancer, he had lymphoma, he had come in for some treatment, and he had this disastrous result. So even a transplant was not in the cards yet, because he needed to go through actual chemotherapy. So the doctors were trying all heroic efforts, to keep him alive, but he needed a transplant, and time was running out. So I started to see him. On the 5th of the initial 6 visits that I had with him, I reported to the doctor that his heart was beginning to hold a charge, and I had encountered toxicity in the cells, and I was working to dispel the toxicity. And I remember this tender moment. His mother, was there with me all the time, and she, lifted up his shirt for me so I could put my hand on his body. And I had my hands on his head and on his chest, and I clearly saw a shaft of light enter through his head into his heart. And the mother took a breath just at that same time. So I saw it, and I enhanced the field. I kind of disengaged, and I left the room. So the next day, I arrived late. It was a late Sunday evening, and I went to his room, and his room was empty. And my heart fell. And I thought, he had died. But then I saw his mom down the hall, and she was waving to me, come, come. So she took my arm, and she led me into the room, and the room was quiet. There were no machines. There was no ECMO. This tiny boy was sitting up in his bed, able to respond to questions. And the mom and I looked at each other, and we took a long, tearful breath. And for me, this is the heart of healing. This is the divine mystery of how this happened. But being involved in research in the hospital, I went and I checked the medical records, and there it was in black and white. From the day of the first treatment, when systolic function was just 3%, the cardiac function began to improve after each treatment. After the first treatment, it was 10%. And after the 5th day of treatment, the echocardiogram showed only mildly depressed function. And 10 days after the initial treatment, the echo showed essentially normal function. So thank you once again for inviting me to speak with you. Thank you.